In the grand corridors of Western philosophy, names like Descartes, Kant, and Nietzsche echo loudly, etched into the minds of generations. Yet, occasionally, wisdom is found in the quieter chambers, places where philosophy unfolds not in grand systems, but in subtle observations about life's rhythms. Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs, a relatively obscure French philosopher born in 1766, belongs to this quieter tradition. His ideas did not spark revolutions or lead schools of thought, but they offer something perhaps more enduring, a roadmap for personal resilience, peace, and wisdom grounded in the natural order of life itself. Azaïs lived through an era of great political and philosophical upheaval, the French Revolution, Napoleonic Wars, and the restoration of monarchy. He absorbed the tremors of a society swinging between chaos and control. Yet, rather than offering reactionary ideologies or utopian dreams, Azaïs developed a philosophy of equilibrium. His key belief was that all experiences, suffering, joy, failure, success, balance each other out over time through a universal law of compensation. This doctrine might seem deceptively simple, but it cuts to the heart of life's complexity. Azaïs suggests that instead of resisting pain or chasing pleasure, we ought to understand the patterns that govern our existence. If we can do that, we become calmer, wiser, and more capable of enduring life's storms. Why should we care today about a nearly forgotten philosopher who wrote in the 19th century? The answer lies in our modern disorientation. In a world overloaded with information, fast-paced goals, and pressure to succeed, Azaïs reminds us that balance is the true aim. He teaches that suffering is not a mistake but part of a greater design, and that patience often bears more fruit than struggle. In this video, we will explore the key tenets of Azaïs's philosophy, draw out the life lessons they offer, and reflect on how they apply in today's world. From the concept of compensation to his vision of determinism and moral balance, Azaïs offers a deep and often comforting wisdom, not loud or flashy, but calm, rooted, and resilient. Let's begin by understanding the men behind the ideas. A brief biography of Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs. Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs was born in 1766 in the southern French town of Cerise, in the region of Languedoc. This period in France was marked by philosophical excitement and political uncertainty. Azaïs came of age during the Enlightenment, which encouraged rational thinking, individual rights, and the pursuit of knowledge. He would later live through the French Revolution and its aftermath, a time when philosophical ideas collided violently with real-world consequences. Not much is known about Azaïs's early life in vivid detail, but what we do know paints the picture of a quiet thinker more interested in ideas than power. Unlike more prominent philosophers who taught at famous universities or engaged in public debates, Azaïs preferred the solitude of intellectual work. He was drawn to music as well as philosophy, and for a time, he worked as a music teacher and theorist, believing in the interconnectedness of rhythm, harmony, and the human experience. This emphasis on balance and harmony carried directly into his philosophical work. One of the most profound challenges Azaïs faced was the gradual loss of his hearing, a condition that worsened as he aged. Rather than succumbing to despair, he channeled his sensory deprivation into introspection. His loss of hearing led him deeper into a life of contemplation, reinforcing his belief that the internal life of the mind could provide its own kind of sustenance. Azaïs published several works, the most influential of which was Des compensations dans les destinies humaines, on the compensations in human destinies. In this work, he laid out his core philosophy, that every hardship in life carries a counterbalance, and that justice, though not always visible, is inherent in the structure of existence itself. His works were never widely celebrated in his lifetime, and he died in relative obscurity in 1845. Yet his ideas persisted in certain philosophical and spiritual circles. Some considered him an early forerunner to existential and humanist thought, while others saw his teachings as a bridge between Enlightenment rationality and deeper spiritual insight. The humility of his life, coupled with the depth of his thinking, make Azaïs a compelling figure. He didn't seek fame. He didn't clamor for attention. He simply tried to understand the laws that govern human existence and live accordingly, a life lesson in itself. The law of compensation, the central pillar of Azaïs's philosophy. At the heart of Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs's philosophical vision lies the law of compensation, the idea that life is inherently balanced, even if not immediately so. According to this principle, every experience of suffering is met, eventually, by an experience of relief, reward, or meaning. Conversely, moments of pleasure and success are tempered by the inevitabilities of loss, aging, and change. The world, Azaïs argued, is not chaotic but self-regulating, and the human journey reflects this order. This concept may remind some of the Taoist principle of yin and yang, or the Stoic notion that virtue lies in understanding what one can and cannot control. But Azaïs added a unique dimension. He saw compensation not just as a metaphysical truth, but as a psychological and moral guide for how to live well. When we accept that hardships are compensated, if not today, then in time, we can face them with grace rather than fear. In his writings, Azaïs explored this law in multiple domains. In nature, storms are followed by calm, droughts by rain, decay by regrowth. He saw nature as the ultimate proof of this principle. In human emotion, deep sorrow can lead to profound wisdom. The most joyful people are often those who have known great loss. In society, he argued that social upheaval, like the French Revolution, while painful, ultimately restores equilibrium by correcting injustices or stagnation. Azaïs didn't claim that every individual would see perfect justice in their lifetime. Rather, he suggested that on a cosmic or generational scale, life tends toward fairness. This perspective challenges the cynicism of modern times. In a world where inequality, tragedy, and random misfortune are ever present, Azaïs's theory can sound naive. But it may also serve as an antidote to despair, a reminder that time and effort often yield surprising returns. His philosophy teaches us to adopt a longer view. If you're going through a painful period, Azaïs would urge you not to panic or wallow but to endure with faith in life's self-correcting nature. If you're in a season of success, he would encourage humility and preparedness, for that too will shift. In modern terms, this could be compared to psychological resilience or the growth mindset, seeing failure as temporary and potentially productive. We now have scientific language for what Azaïs intuited, that the brain is shaped by experience, and that perseverance often leads to growth and healing. Equilibrium in all things, the pursuit of balance. Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs didn't view equilibrium as just a concept relevant to the natural world. For him, equilibrium was the governing principle of all reality, from the motion of the planets to the inner turmoil of human hearts. Where there is excess, life seeks moderation. Where there is chaos, order emerges. And at every level of existence, physical, emotional, moral, and social, there is a gravitational pull toward balance. This understanding of equilibrium as a universal force carries powerful implications for how we live. In our modern era, dominated by extremes, overwork, overstimulation, overindulgence, Azaïs's call for balance feels prophetic. He would likely view burnout, anxiety, and polarization not just as social or psychological problems, but as signs that our lives are out of rhythm with nature's deeper harmonies. Azaïs on internal balance. For individuals, Azaïs believed that mental peace stems from alignment, a balance between desires and duties, dreams and reality, effort and rest. He saw emotional imbalance as the root of much human suffering. When people chase pleasure to escape pain, they often throw themselves further into turmoil. The antidote, in his view, was not abstinence but awareness, to observe one's life and tendencies with enough clarity to restore inner symmetry. This idea resonates with contemporary practices like mindfulness and emotional regulation. In therapy and wellness circles today, we speak of holding space for conflicting emotions, recognizing that grief and gratitude can coexist. Azaïs would likely nod in agreement. His philosophy suggests that maturity comes not from choosing one extreme, but from learning how to hold opposites in tension, and in doing so, finding peace. Work, rest, and the modern crisis of time. One area where his ideas particularly shine is in the modern work-life dilemma. We live in a culture that valorizes hustle, productivity, and achievement. Rest is often treated as laziness, and idleness as a personal flaw. But Azaïs reminds us that too much effort without restoration leads to collapse. Just as a field cannot be harvested continuously without becoming barren, the human spirit requires fallow seasons. Azaïs's message might be, do your work, passionately, with purpose, but then stop. Rest. Reflect. Let the wheel turn. Today, many find themselves burnt out not because of too little passion, but too much unchecked drive. They're caught in what philosophers like Byung-Chul Han call the achievement society, where everyone is their own taskmaster. Azaïs's philosophy acts as a brake pedal, urging us to trust that not everything is up to us, and that withdrawing is sometimes wiser than pushing forward. Moral and social balance. Beyond the individual, Azaïs extended his law of equilibrium to societies. He believed that just as natural systems right themselves over time, human systems, though prone to corruption or collapse, will eventually return to justice. This is not to say he believed in utopia, but rather in cycles. Empires rise and fall, oppression eventually breeds resistance, and revolutions, though painful, can restore equity. In political terms, this echoes modern ideas of historical dialectics, like those found in Hegel or Marx, where conflict produces synthesis. Azaïs, however, maintained a gentler tone, less about class struggle, more about the quiet assurance that nothing unsustainable can last forever. If power becomes too concentrated, if inequality grows too wide, balance will assert itself, slowly, perhaps invisibly, but inevitably. The modern implication: seek symmetry. Applied today, Azaïs's law of equilibrium urges us to examine where we are out of alignment. Are we sacrificing health for career? Are we caught in ideological rigidity? Are we emotionally lopsided, investing too much in outcomes we can't control? His philosophy encourages intentional self-checking, a life of deliberate pacing and perspective. Balance, in his view, is not a static state but a dynamic one. It requires constant adjustment, like sailing, small corrections, gentle awareness, and trust in the wider ocean. In an age obsessed with acceleration and hacking life, Azaïs invites us to slow down and harmonize. In doing so, we don't just avoid burnout, we come into deeper communion with the laws of the universe itself. Suffering and the role of adversity. One of the most profound, and perhaps most challenging, elements of Azaïs's philosophy is his understanding of suffering. Unlike many thinkers who tried to minimize or escape the reality of pain, Azaïs gave it a central, even sacred place in his worldview. He argued that suffering is not an aberration but an integral part of the human experience, a catalyst for depth, growth, and ultimately, balance. This view is both comforting and confronting. In an age where much of life is built around avoiding discomfort, through entertainment, convenience, medication, or distraction, Azaïs offers a radical reframe. What if pain is not a problem to be solved, but a teacher to be listened to? Suffering as a necessary counterbalance. To Azaïs, suffering serves a compensatory role. It deepens joy, strengthens character, and widens the emotional range of the individual. Without pain, he argued, there would be no contrast through which to appreciate peace or happiness. Just as light needs shadow to define it, so too does joy need sorrow. This isn't just philosophical abstraction. Many who have endured loss, illness, or trauma will attest to a strange transformation. Pain, when faced directly, often leads to clarity. It distills what matters. It reshapes priorities. It humbles us and connects us with others in ways success rarely can. Azaïs didn't romanticize suffering, he acknowledged its difficulty, but he insisted on its dignity. And this matters deeply today, in a culture that often treats suffering as failure. Resilience, not resistance. A key life lesson from Azaïs is to resist the urge to resist, paradoxical as that sounds. When we rail against hardship, we often amplify it. But when we accept it, not passively but purposefully, we begin to transform it. This is echoed in the therapeutic idea of radical acceptance, championed in modern psychology and especially in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. It means facing pain without denial or avoidance, not because it's pleasant, but because it's true. Azaïs would recognize this immediately. Accepting suffering is not defeat, but alignment. This also ties to the idea of post-traumatic growth, the notion that people can emerge from suffering not just scarred, but strengthened. Azaïs anticipated this long before it had a name. Examples from life. Imagine someone who has just lost a loved one. The temptation is to numb, to move on quickly. But in doing so, we may never integrate the full meaning of the loss. Azaïs would counsel sitting with the grief, not to wallow, but to allow it to do its work. Over time, that same grief may cultivate a deeper love for those still living, or spark a purpose-driven life shift. In this way, suffering compensates by sowing seeds of unexpected good. Another example, failure in a career. Azaïs's view would suggest that such failure, while painful, is not final. It is a course correction, an opportunity to reevaluate values, sharpen skills, or change direction. Many successful people will say their worst moments taught them their most valuable lessons. Azaïs understood that long before TED Talks did. A wisdom for our times. Today, we face widespread crises of mental health, burnout, and alienation. Much of it stems from the belief that life should be painless if done correctly, that sadness, fear, and confusion are glitches in the system. Azaïs teaches the opposite. Those emotions are the system. They are signals, messengers, and raw material for transformation. In embracing his view of suffering, we are not choosing misery. We are choosing maturity, the kind of spiritual and emotional maturity that sees value where others see only ruin. Suffering is not the end of the road. Sometimes, it is the beginning of a wiser path. Determinism and the freedom within structure. Determinism is a word that often provokes discomfort. It suggests that everything is already decided, that our choices are illusions, and that personal agency is a myth. In the hands of some philosophers, determinism becomes a doctrine of despair. Life is a mechanical, preordained process in which the self has no real say. But Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs approached determinism from a different angle. For him, determinism was not the enemy of freedom, but its container. It was the structure that made freedom meaningful. To Azaïs, life unfolds according to certain laws, physical, moral, and metaphysical. These laws create the conditions in which human beings live, much like the laws of gravity govern movement or the principles of harmony govern music. But within those laws lies a space for wisdom, discernment, and choice. In other words, we don't control the game board, but we do choose how to move on it. The river and the rowboat, Azaïs's view of life. Imagine life as a river. You cannot change its flow. You don't control the current, the bends, or the direction of the water. That's determinism. But within that river, you have a rowboat. You can steer. You can avoid rocks. You can choose to row, to pause, or to navigate toward the shore. That's your freedom. Azaïs believed that much of human suffering comes from trying to fight the current, attempting to bend reality to our will, rather than understanding its rhythm and adapting to it. He advocated for cooperation with life's flow, not because we are powerless, but because we are wiser when we acknowledge our limits. In this sense, his determinism is deeply empowering. It asks us not to waste energy trying to control the uncontrollable but to focus our efforts where they matter, on our responses, our values, and our ability to interpret events meaningfully. Anticipating modern psychology and Stoic philosophy. There are strong parallels between Azaïs's philosophy and the teachings of the Stoics, especially Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics also believed in a kind of determinism, that the universe unfolds according to reason, logos, and that our role is not to resist fate, but to respond to it with virtue. Modern psychology, especially in fields like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, echoes this as well. We may not control external events, but we can choose how we think about them, and those thoughts shape our feelings and actions. In this way, Azaïs was ahead of his time. He understood that freedom is not the absence of structure, but the intelligent use of structure. Like a musician improvising within a scale, or a poet working within a form, we gain creativity not by escaping constraints, but by engaging with them consciously. Practical life lessons from Azaïs's determinism. Learn to differentiate between control and influence. You cannot control whether people like you, but you can influence relationships through kindness and consistency. You cannot control outcomes, but you can control your preparation and intention. Let go of the obsession with certainty. Much of modern anxiety stems from trying to guarantee a specific future. Azaïs would say, accept the limits of prediction. Act wisely, and trust that the balance of life will reveal itself over time. Cultivate inner freedom. When we stop trying to dictate external events, we free up energy for internal mastery, our thoughts, our reactions, our sense of meaning. This is the kind of freedom Azaïs prized most. Don't wait for perfect conditions to act. In a deterministic universe, waiting for ideal circumstances may be futile. Instead, act with the tools you have, where you are, now. The system is always in motion, your job is to move with it. A philosophy for the modern mind. In today's world, we are constantly told that we must manifest our reality, hustle for control, and carve our own destiny. While ambition and effort are valuable, this message often leads to stress, perfectionism, and disillusionment. Azaïs offers a gentler, more sustainable truth. You are not the master of the universe, but you are not a prisoner either. You are part of a larger system, one that is not always just or clear, but one that tends toward compensation and balance. Your role is to live wisely within that system, not to conquer it. In this space between fate and freedom, Azaïs finds peace. And if we listen, we might too. The quiet life of truth, Azaïs as a model of integrity. There is something uniquely powerful about a person whose life mirrors their beliefs. Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs was not a towering figure in salons or universities. He didn't lead political movements, nor did he court the spotlight. Instead, he lived a life of quiet reflection, disciplined thought, and personal hardship, all of which gave substance to his philosophical vision. Azaïs's commitment to truth was not performative. He wasn't trying to become famous or market a set of ideas. He simply wanted to understand the nature of life and live accordingly. In this way, he becomes not just a thinker to study, but a model to emulate. Obscurity as a virtue. In our current culture, one increasingly driven by visibility, social media metrics, and constant self-promotion, the idea of living a full intellectual and moral life in obscurity seems almost alien. Yet that is exactly what Azaïs did. He published his ideas not for fame, but for the sake of truth. He pursued knowledge not to build a brand, but to find peace and offer wisdom. This, in itself, is a life lesson. You don't have to be widely known to live meaningfully. You don't need applause to matter. Azaïs reminds us that impact isn't always loud. Quiet lives, lived with consistency, care, and clarity, often resonate more deeply in the long run than noisy ones. There is integrity in a life not consumed by performance. A life of endurance. We must also consider the challenges he faced. Azaïs became deaf later in life, a condition that could have isolated him or silenced his intellectual pursuits. But rather than giving in to despair, he leaned into introspection. He turned his solitude into a strength. The very disability that might have ended his career in another context instead deepened his insight. This reflects one of his core beliefs: suffering, when accepted, becomes a tool of growth. His own life became a living proof of the law of compensation. Loss of hearing led to greater inward vision. Social obscurity protected the purity of his thought. Hardship wasn't a detour, it was the path. Living by principles. Perhaps what's most admirable about Azaïs is his refusal to compromise. He didn't change his ideas to suit fashion. He didn't dilute his message for popularity. He remained committed to his philosophical mission, even as the world changed around him. There's a quiet heroism in staying loyal to one's principles without needing recognition for it. Azaïs teaches us that living a good life doesn't require grandeur. It requires fidelity to truth, openness to hardship, and a willingness to keep going, even when no one is watching. Conclusion: wisdom in the quiet places. In a world addicted to noise, speed, and spectacle, the quiet wisdom of Pierre Hyacinthe Azaïs may be exactly what we need. He did not offer formulas for fame or success. He did not promise that life would always be fair, or easy, or joyful. Instead, he offered something more enduring, a framework for understanding life's complexity, navigating suffering, and finding peace not by escaping reality, but by embracing it. Azaïs's central belief in the law of compensation reminds us that life is not a straight line, nor is it random chaos. It is a cycle, a pendulum that swings between extremes, always searching for balance. When we are in pain, we can take comfort in knowing that joy will eventually return. When we are in joy, we can be wise enough to prepare for challenge. His message encourages both hope and humility, grounded in the deep structure of existence. Through his vision of equilibrium, Azaïs teaches us the importance of balance, not just in nature, but in our inner lives, our relationships, our work, and our emotions. He offers an antidote to extremism in all its forms, urging us instead to cultivate symmetry, rhythm, and thoughtful moderation. His reflection on suffering is especially poignant. Rather than treating hardship as a mistake, he saw it as essential to human growth. Suffering, in his view, is not a punishment, it is a necessary shadow that shapes the contours of our joy, purpose, and resilience. In this, he offers a moral and emotional clarity that can carry us through even the darkest seasons. And through his nuanced take on determinism, Azaïs frees us from the illusion of total control, while still preserving the dignity of human agency. We may not dictate the conditions of our lives, but we can always choose how to respond to them. In that space, between fate and freedom, lies our true strength. Perhaps most powerfully, Azaïs lived what he taught. He did not seek the limelight. He remained loyal to truth, humble in obscurity, and steady in adversity. His life is a testament to the idea that real philosophy isn't found in lectures or books alone, it's found in how we endure, how we reflect, and how we choose to live with grace, even when no one is watching. In a culture overwhelmed by complexity, Azaïs offers a refreshingly simple message. Live in harmony with the world. Trust the process of balance. Endure suffering with open eyes. Seek wisdom in stillness. And perhaps most of all, you do not have to shout to live a life worth hearing.